In this video I'm going to show you how to create a simple form in HTML, CSS and JavaScript. After we have collected the form input, I'm going to display the data using a modal overlay. I will demonstrate the form. Assume it's working. That's the output. Then to close it, and it clears the screen. So let's get started. I'm going to create a div with an ID of overlay. And inside that I'm going to create another div with an ID of overlay box. And then inside an h2 tag I'm going to put your results. I'm going to create another div with the class of results. Down here I'm going to create a container with the class container. I'm going to create a form with a class of form and an ID of my form. I'm going to give it h1 tag, example form, and create another div which is a form group, and here I'm going to create a label for the input called first name. First name is the ID of the input, and when you click on the label, it'll give the input focus because of that for first name. The name is also given first name. I'm going to copy down the form group and change this to last name. The name and ID is going to be last name as well. This one's for the email. It's going to be a type email rather than text. Given the input type email means that if you type in an invalid email address, it'll give you an error message. So now we're going to create a field set. This will create a box around, in this case it's going to be a radio button. The legend will give it a title at the top of the surrounding box. I could create two radio buttons for whether a person is male or female. First one's checked, the male one's checked, so that would be a default. I'm going to put it inside a div of class radio group. The way radio buttons work is you can have one of the radio buttons selected, but not more than one. Unlike checkboxes, where you can have more than one of the checkboxes in the group selected. So I'm going to create another field set, this time for the checkboxes. Create a checkbox group. The input, the type will be checkbox. Create a label for this checkbox. This is the CSS label. This is the HTML checkbox. These 4s need to be the same as the IDs. Change this to the HTML. Create another form group. This time is going to be for the select box. Select box is a drop down box. Give it a name of status. And the size is 1. This is so that only one of the options will show. And an ID of status. The default value in the select box will be choose. We will make it selected by putting the keyword selected by the choose option. Copy these down. Make some more options. Delete the selected part because we only want one selected. Make this the school. College. Retired. Then I could insert another one for working. Right, onto the styles. Select the body tag, give it a font family of Arial, Helvetica and Sans Serif, and set the text align to center and the font size to 1.1 rem and margin to 0. Next, do the H2 tag, set the font size to 2.9 rem and the color to a blue, set the overlay ID to display none, because we don't want the overlay to appear until we click on the login button. And the opacity is set to 0. Opacity is the inverse of transparent, so opacity 0 means invisible, whereas opacity 1 is visible. I'm going to set the background color to be 50% transparent. I will do this by setting the RGBA color. RGBA stands for red, green, blue, alpha. The alpha channel gives the degree of transparency. In this case, I'm going to set it to 0.5, which means it will be 50% transparent. I'm going to set the position property to fixed. This will mean I can set the overlay in a position relative to its parent, which in this case is the body element. I want to cover the whole screen, so I'm going to set top, bottom, right and left to 0. Set the cursor to pointer. This will set a pointer when you mouse over it. Set the Z index to 2. This will make sure it goes to the front. Set the overlay box. Set it to display flex. The flex direction to column. Position absolute. The height 400 px. And width 400 px. Background color to white. Left 50%, top 50%. Transform, translate, minus 50%. Minus 50%. Now position it in the center of the screen. So we'll do the container class, select to display flex, and the background will be an off-white, slightly sort of a light grey colour. and the flex direction will be column, so as they stack on top of one another. Height is 100 viewport height. Justify contents. Space between around. Align items center. So I set the form now to display flex. The background color to white. The flex direction to column again. Justify content, space around, align items center to center them in the padding to EM, min height 800 px. Minimum width 400 px. And we use the box shadow we used before. Now we set up the form group class. Set display to flex, height to 60 px, and the gap to 0.2, and the width to 100%. The flex direction to column. Align items, stretch, justify content to stretch. First name ID and last name ID. Email ID. Set it to padding of 0.5 EM. So we're doing all the input boxes. Border 1px, solid, blue, First name hover. First name focus. Last name hover. Last name focus. Set all those plus the email, hover, and email focus. Set them to background color. We'll make it a light blue. So whenever you hover or click on any of the input boxes, you'll get a light blue background. Field set is display flex, or a gap of 0.2 em, and flex direction of column. Align items. Flex start, so to put them at the start. Width is 100%. Radio group, checkbox group, display, flex, gap, 0.5 em, flex direction, row, forgot to put the labels in, so I'm going to put those in. This is for the male. And this one's for the female. It's better. Now to the form group, label, so this will be the label inside the form group. Set it to flex start, so that's got, you've got the label comes at the start of the input box now. Form group select, so we're working on the select box now. Set the font size to 1.2 rem and the outline to none. do the button. Padding 0.75 rem. 1.5 rem. Border none. Margin 10px. Cursor pointer. Font size 1 rem. Font weight bold. Background color I like grey again. Then button blue to give it a blue colour. Ground colour. This is a blue. And the text will be white. Align self, stretch. Notice that the field set boxes don't align very well with the input boxes. We can get over this by setting the box sizing to border box. So asterisk for it to be everywhere, then box sizing is border box, and now it's all aligned. So now onto the JavaScript. Set constant my form equal to document dot get element by ID my form. So it gives us a reference to the my form element. Now we can set a add event listener with a click, submit rather, and a function E for the event, and then we set the event to prevent default, to stop it reloading, which is what it does by default. So now we're going to create a form data item. I'm using the new keyword. New in this case means create a blank form data object. I'm giving the form data this keyword. This refers to the data from our form. And we set name and values equal to the contents of the form data entries. Form data entries function returns all the form data items. We can console log that out. the name and values. The input box should have a blue outline. There is something wrong there. I will deal with it in a minute. Fill in the form, Fred, blogs, fred@yahoo.com, leave them as mail, set all of these, select working, login, and there's the result, and it produces the result of an array of arrays. And the inner array has a name and a value. So now I would deal with the black line around the input boxes. Here it is. I have typed LPX instead of 1PX. Sorry about that. So now what we're going to do is get the part of the form that's the languages. That's the CSS, HTML and JavaScript. Because we want that to appear on all one line rather than as code and then a language, then code another language and code in another language. So we're using a function on the name and values called filter, and we're going to filter out the code items. So if it's has the name value of code, we're going to return it. You'll see inside the filter I've used an arrow function. Let me explain to you about arrow functions. Starting with the name functions, this is what way we normally do an ordinary function. We have a name and we return 2 + 2. In this one we're using an arrow function. You just have brackets. You don't have the keyword function, and you have an arrow, and then you have the normal curly braces and return 2 + 2. But in this case you assign it to a constant called myname. On the anonymous functions, a normal function just doesn't have a name, but in this one you just don't have the keyword function. You have parentheses and the arrow symbol and then curly brackets. What you can also have with arrow functions is if you don't have the curly brackets and the return, it can be implied. So this 2 + 2 here past the arrow will return automatically. So this will give us a set of names and values, names and code. And next we want just the languages, and so I'm going to use a join function which will join the array items into one string, and then I'm going to use a replace all function. This will replace all the code comma items to just a space. So now we're going to console log out the languages and code and the languages. Languages and code. Languages and code. Language. Language. Now fill out the form. Thread. Blogs. Thread at yahoo.com. Making female this time. Set the languages. Set him as college. And there we have our result in the console. We have both the language and code and just the languages as well. Now set a constant for the overlay. Document get element by ID. Overlay. Let form data. So set a global form data variable. Delete this. I get name and values, not the languages. So I'm going to use the name and values array, and then we're going to use a filter. Filter is an inbuilt function that we can use on arrays to filter out just the names of values and not the languages. So it's not equal to code, then we'll return the name and value. So we're getting everything but the languages. Put a comment here. All values except the languages. This one's going to be just the languages. Set that to languages. So next we set the overlay display to block. Overlay.style .display equals block. And we set the overlay opacity to 1 so that it's visible. Next we set the results equal to document query selector dot results. So we've got a reference to the results class. Then we take the names of values, not langs. We do a for each loop and pass the value through. And set the name and val to value. Then set the inner HTML of the results to div class equals result and div class equals cell. And then plus the name so we're putting the name in the cell and close the div. Create another div, class equals cell, this one will be for the result, plus the value, close the div, close the outer div. Now we need to do the language, so create a div again, class result, class equals cell, then languages, close the div, close the, it's another div with a class of cell, the languages in, and we convert them to a string, and close the div, close the outer div, the result div. Try it out now. And there we are, we get the results. They just need formatting a bit. Make it a bit neater. So we're going to create some classes now. Create the results class. Display flex. Set the height to 100%. Set the flex direction to column. Justify content, space between. The padding is 1 EM. Make that a dot result because it's a class. Next we do dot just result. Set the display to flex again. Justify content, space between. And background is EFF6FF. We do the cell, display flex, width is 200px, justify content, justify self, to flex. Start. Put that to college, press, and that looks better. What we need is to put in a div, and we need a way to close the box rather than having to just keep refreshing at it. So we're going to put an X. If we Google to hero icons, this is normally used with Tailwind, but we can use it. If we type in close, close. We get this X, then select copy SVG, then we paste it inside this div. We change these classes because they're Tailwind classes. We're going to give them a name, icon. I'm going to set the stroke to the same color as the button. Set the stroke width to 2. Right, do the icon class now. Set the width to 40px and the height to 40px. And position absolute. So you can position it relative to the box. And we can set the top 10px and the right to 10px, so it goes in the right hand corner, top right hand corner. So now we'll try it. Fred blogs, Fred at yahoo.com. CSS, HTML, JavaScript, college, results, close. It comes up, but it doesn't work yet because we've got to do the JavaScript. I go on to add event listener. Click, because we want it to operate when it's clicked. And create an arrow function. And location reload. And that will reset. It's the same as clicking the reset. Got an error because we haven't created an icon element yet, so I'll have to do that. Go to the top. Constant icon equals document dot get no query selector dot icon. That's it. And let's try it again. Fred blogs Fred at yahoo.com. CSS, HTML and JavaScript. Select school this time. That's it. And click on the X and it goes. Right. So now the only problem is it goes a bit sudden. So what we want to do is create an animation so as it transitions when it shows, and transitions when it closes. So we want to fade in and fade out. So what we're going to do is set up a keyframe in the CSS. We're going to set initially the opacity is going to be 0 for fade in. So when it's 0, it's not showing, but at 100%, the opacity is going to be 1. In other words, it's going to be fully on. So it fades in. Now if we copy this down, we want to create a fade out which does the opposite. We want it to initially be 1 and then go to 0. So now we want to create classes for these. So there's the dot fade in class. I'm going to select display to block and set the WebKit animation name to fade in. Below this, create animation name. Also to fade in. And then animation duration is going to be 0.5 seconds, so that's half a second it's going to run for. And the animation fill mode is forward, so we only want it to run in one direction, and that's forwards. So we need to copy this down for the fade out. Fade out, this one to fade out, and the last two remain the same. Now I need to go to the scripts to set up the JavaScript. So overlay.classlist, remove fade out, and overlay.classlist.add fade in. We don't need that anymore. And also here we need the overlay.classlist. Got to add fade out and remove fade in. So the opposite to what we did before. Right, so try that, see what happens. Fred blogs, fred@yahoo.com, CSS and JavaScript, set working, that works, close, it goes off suddenly. Also, I need to give the dot result some padding because the pale blue background is too small. Padding 0.5 em, 0.2 em. Now to fix it suddenly going off, the location reload happens immediately. So what we're going to have to do is set a delay. So we set timeout function is used for delay, and we put it inside this function that's inside the timeout. And we set it to 500. That's 500 milliseconds. So 500 milliseconds is half a second. So after 500 milliseconds or half a second, it'll reload. So try that. Fred blogs, fred@yahoo.com. Maybe as mail, CSS, HTML and JavaScript. Set it to working. Oh, it goes off immediately. Why is that? It's because we've changed this to fade out. When we copied it down, we didn't change it to fade out. So try again. Jane Doe, jane@gmail.com. Select female, CSS, JavaScript, school, login, fades in, click, fades out. A couple of last things I need to do. This last name label needs to be changed to last name. I've got it at first name at the moment. And also I've used the post mail instead of the sex mail. So I'll go to the index.html, label, this one, change that to last, change this to mail. That's better. Keep this code, you will need it for the next video, which will be about validating the form input. That's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please subscribe.